Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are today. My name is Lori Pilchuk. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with NovoEd, and I'm excited to kick off today's webinar on the important topic of purpose-driven leadership and its role in business and organizational transformation. Based on the overwhelming interest we have had in this webinar, the concept of leading with purpose in these uncertain times seems to be on all of our minds. If you could just go to the next slide. I'm thrilled to be here with two experts on this topic, David Wentworth, Principal Analyst of the Brandon Hall Group, and Claudia della Torre Foglio, Head of Leadership Development of Cemex. David will soon be kicking off today's discussion and will be our host and moderator for today's webinar. David has been a research analyst in the human capital field since 2005, joining the Brandon Hall Group in 2012 to concentrate on learning research. David's research focuses on how people learn and the role of emerging technologies. Claudia has had an extensive career in HR and learning and development. Much of her career has been with Cemex, a $14 billion global materials company headquartered in Monterrey, Mexico. Over the past 2 years, Claudia has overseen the company's leadership development programs, one of which we will discuss in depth today. Before we dive into today's webinar discussion, please allow me to provide a brief overview of today's sponsor, NovoEd. NovoEd was founded at Stanford Social Algorithm Lab about 8 years ago and has become the leading enterprise platform for collaborative learning at scale. Our experiential online platform, enabling deep, high-value learning, is used by organizations around the globe for capability building such as diversity and inclusion, innovation and design thinking, and leadership development, again, like we'll talk about today. In 2018, NovoEd was acquired by Fidelity Investments and is part of its growing workforce education technology portfolio. Now, just a few quick notes before we get into the substance of today's discussion. For those of you who may not be familiar with today's webinar platform, GoToWebinar, please note that you are all on mute. If you would like to make a comment, offer some input, or certainly ask a question, you'll do so using the control panel. And we encourage you to ask questions and provide your comments. We wanted to note that at the end of today's webinar, there will be an exit survey that'll pop up before you leave. And we'd ask that you take a few moments to fill out the survey as it helps us improve our webinar programming. So thank you in advance for that. And lastly, as many of you are already asking, our webinar is indeed being recorded, and you will receive a recording within the next 48 hours. So now, without any further delay, I'd like to pass the baton to David, who is going to run the remainder of the show. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lori, and welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have you here. And as Lori mentioned, take advantage of that question box. It's a great way to communicate with us. You can ask questions of either myself or Claudia, or if you have any insights that you'd like to share, you can put them there. We'll be keeping an eye on that and looking through that. And I'll be asking Claudia some of my own questions throughout the presentation as well. But first, what I wanted to do was ask all of you a question. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. And so that should be open for you, and we'll give you guys a chance to take a look at this. But we're just trying to get a sense, and you can pick any or all of these selections for your organization. But do you think that your organization develops, supports, and promotes these items? And so do you promote and support leaders who drive a culture of diversity and inclusion? Or how about empowering collaboration to drive business results? And do you have leaders who take responsibility for driving that engagement and developing an effective employee value proposition? So just give folks a little bit of a chance to respond to that poll. We'd like to get a sense of who's on the call and some of the things that you're thinking of, maybe what's going on in your organization. We've got about half of you have participated. I'd like to see just a little bit more so we have some decent results. And then I'll share the results with you. And of course, I'm also going to share a lot of the research that we've done here at Brandon Hall Group on leadership development, and take also a look a little bit at what's going on in today's current environment with the coronavirus pandemic and how that's affecting leadership development. I think we've done pretty good. Let's take a look here at the results. I don't want to spend too much more time there, so let's take a look. And 78% of you did say, yes, we do have leaders who empower collaboration to drive business results, which is great. But we have less than half saying that they develop leaders who take responsibility for driving engagement and an effective employee value proposition. So I think that's interesting output here that we're looking at. And what's great about this is I think the story that Claudia is going to share does a great job of talking about an environment in which they are developing these kinds of leaders. So it'll be great to talk about that. So I'm going to hide that poll and step ahead into our research. So I just asked you that question. So I would in turn like to share with you the results of our research that show what's going on in this area. So we asked that same question of our respondents, and what we found is that we compare company groups in our research. We have what's called HiPOs, which is short for high performing organizations. Those are companies whose key performance indicators are outperforming the others. And we try to see if there's anything different going on in those organizations. And so what we found is this, again, these are the same choices you had in your poll. And among companies that say that their leaders drive a culture of diversity and inclusion, you can see the difference between high performers and everybody else. 84% for high performers, 65% for everybody else. As far as empowering collaboration to drive business results, it's 91% to 71%. And then when we look at the last piece, which is driving that in the engagement and the employee value proposition, 75% to 56%. So it actually sort of follows a very similar pattern that we saw in your results here on the poll, as far as which one was picked the most and which one was picked the least. But I think it's more important here to see the disparity between high performing organizations and everybody else. So interesting to take a look at that. So some of the other research we've done is we asked other questions around leadership development. So we wanted to get a sense of these organizations. Do you believe that your current leadership as a group have the competencies and emotional intelligence that you need to be successful over the next couple of years? And so you see here that 59% of companies said yes, they do, and 41% said they don't. So the good news is at least more than half, but 41% of companies don't believe that their current leaders have this. And just to fill in, we had a couple questions come in. Someone asked about who the high performing companies are. They're basically the companies in our study whose key performance indicators are positive year over year across 6 different categories. So they're not specifically named companies, they are companies based on that performance. And the study had about 450 respondents of all sizes across the globe, mostly North America, about 61% North America, but the rest from around the globe, and all types of industries as well. So we did ask, okay, what, do you have these leaders that have the competencies and skills? And if not, well, why not? So the number one reason is they don't have proper succession management. They don't have the way to get people into those roles that should be in those roles. They're not very good at picking the high potentials, the people that should be taking up those leadership positions. And then also, they're not active, the current leadership isn't active in developing new leaders, is another reason. So you can see here some of the reasons why companies may feel they're falling short in these leadership outcomes that they're looking for. So then we wanted to know what are companies doing to try to get to this point. And so we asked what the top approaches were. And again, you can see the difference here between the higher performers, which is the lighter colored bars, and everybody else, which should be the darker colored. What we see is more investment in developing leaders at all levels. And I think this is a key element, because we see this in a lot of our research, and I think Claudia's example is going to highlight this a little bit. The idea of it isn't really just about your current leaders and making them better, but it's developing leaders at all levels of the organization, so that you have that succession pipeline, that people are leading at all levels and are carrying the characteristics that the organization needs. And you can see the difference here between 62% and 41%. And then, do you develop or enhance an organization-wide leadership model for how leaders should think and act? And then increased focus on coaching and mentoring at all levels, another big one. Anthony makes a good point. I think it would be important to separate competencies and emotional intelligence. In fact, we did that in this study, but I'll just share this anecdotally, is when we asked companies, what's more important for your leadership? Is it that they have the competencies or that they have emotional intelligence? And it was about 60-40. Now, it was polar opposite for high performers and everyone else. For high performers, it was 60% said it was more important that they have emotional intelligence, and then 40% have the competencies. For everybody else, it was 60% have the competencies and 40% have the emotional intelligence. So there's something there to note, that there's a little bit of at least a casual correlation between high performers and looking for leaders who have that emotional intelligence. So speaking of the concept of emotional intelligence, obviously we're all going through a very interesting time at the moment, and organizations have been struggling to figure out how to deal with this in all aspects of the business. And so we've been doing research and running surveys on COVID-19 since the beginning, early March, when it started to really take effect. In our most latest research, we asked companies, okay, what are the most inclusive leadership behaviors that you're seeing from a D&I perspective that are being demonstrated at your organization throughout this pandemic? The number one thing is they've seen that leaders are showing caring and understanding the well-being of others. They see that these leaders are adapting and persevering in the face of challenge. They're showing kindness and patience and genuine interest. And we've had a lot of conversations with these organizations, and it's very important to have these things because everyone's struggling, everyone's stressed to one degree or another for various reasons. And living in a new world where it's all remote, people don't feel as connected as they did before. Leaders are being put to the test here. And I think what this all comes around to say, and the reason why we think this Cemex program is so great, is we're talking about developing leaders who can succeed in this element, rather than trying to train people to address the current situation. It's knowing that you have leadership that can handle any situation like this that may come up in the future. Because again, no one was really predicting this was going to happen even as late as late last year. And so having these elements in your leadership is all about being prepared for this and for the next. And so with that, what I wanted to do is actually turn this over to Claudia and have her talk a little bit about the program at Cemex and tell you a little bit about Cemex as well.
Hi.
Yep. Hi.
Yeah. Thank you. I was already speaking, sorry. So thank you everyone for attending today. I would like to start first by sharing a bit of what Cemex. If we could go to the next slide, please, David. Well, Cemex is a global building materials company started more than 100 years ago. Started as a local player here at Mexico, and now we are part of the top global companies in the industry. We have more than 40,000 employees worldwide, and Cemex is positioned in all the regions, and we produce cement, ready mix, and aggregates mainly, but we complement with related building materials, services, and solutions. We can see some of the features here, but I just wanted to highlight that we as a company, we have a very diverse footprint. We are all over the world, and we have people from all over the place. So if we could go to the next one. We found some years ago, because this is not new actually, we learned that having a clear mission and aligning the organization through our purpose was a great way to align everyone, no matter where they are. So we have a clear mission, purpose, values that we live in, and you can ask everyone from Cemex. Whenever we start a meeting, our first comment is around health and safety, because that's one of our values and it's always one of our priorities. And we really care about the strategic pillars that guide our behaviors everywhere. And I think that when we think on leadership development and we align to this organization as a purpose-driven organization, we start creating alignment as well in our development and in our leaders. Could we move to the next one? And let me start sharing about the program per se. The program is called Connect, and that is something that came later on, but we started with a clear need of developing leaders that were actually in the transition of being individual contributors to managers of others. And we thought this was a key moment to help, and actually all of our leadership development programs are helping leaders to arrive to that transition and to prepare them to new steps in the organization. So if we think on what is the audience for this specific program, Connect, we thought on the managers that are becoming managers for the first time. And we think that this level of employees in the company are really key because they are setting the culture within the broader teams and the broader organization. And we really thought it was key to create a common skill set for these managers. And let me go through a small story behind that, if we can move to the next one. We actually started creating a face-to-face experience that had a virtual and a digital component, and we spent, I can remember well, but just imagine 3 to 4 months working and managing the whole proposal for that manager program. And at the end, we found that it was very difficult to escalate, to reach to all of our geographies, to reach all of our languages as well, and to deploy at the same time worldwide when we have more than 3,000 managers to support. So it was an initial effort trying to manage that, but at the end we decided not to pursue that avenue, and we actually kept that aside, and for a few months we didn't work on that, and then we came along as well, trying to reframe the problem and find a new way to solve it. So if we could go to the next one. We decided that our leadership development program would be focused on building leadership capabilities. We are sure that we have forces that shape any of our programs, like our values, our leadership model, and the context within the organization at the moment of that program. But we have to make sure that whatever we were going to include in the program we're going to be reflected in the realities of these new leaders, making sure that we help them to be successful in their new role at Cemex as a manager. Well, first, be successful at Cemex, and then be successful at this new role, making sure they are delivering and also being able to move to the next level. So we identified a set of unique behaviors that we wanted on every leader to display worldwide. And even though that they are very basic things, we really tried to make sure that we aligned the thought around how we are thinking as an organization in our purpose, how we actually try with that purpose to not only know where we are heading to, but also align the hearts and minds of everyone in the organization to pursue the goals that everyone at their level have, and that may differ, but if they are all aligned, then we're working as an orchestra, right? If we could move again, sorry, David, thank you. So we thought on what's Connect. We call it Connect because we really think that this is the central node. This level of managers is the central node that would drive the cultural change at Cemex. So these are the managers that will help us build connections with their teams, making sure that we build the employee experience that we want them to have, but also making sure that they connect with the broader strategy and make sure that they drive through a clear alignment of the company's values and organizational goals, etc., to the team's goals, values, and organization. So they are the node that actually makes this successful. And they would help us forging networks of connections across the organization to make sure that we build an ecosystem that would collaborate and connect within each other. So the name of the program, which is Connect, it actually shares part of the philosophy, shares part of the learning objectives that learners must have through the program, and gives part of the spirit of this leadership development program. We had key factors to consider, considering that this was not our first attempt. We had the urgency to make sure that we developed something that came rapidly and with speed to market, making sure that there's the need and we had already time having that need. So now also we have the need of being very successful delivering to the organization the program per se. The second thing was making sure that we could scale so the program could be implemented worldwide at the same time, making sure that we use the opportunity to share clear mindset of a specific concepts, to make sure that we also get everyone familiar with what kind of leaders we need at the company and the great examples that we already have, because we do have great inspirational leaders and maybe they are not known at all the locations, but I really think that if we provide a good platform to enhance those messages, it's something that we could achieve. And finally, making sure that we invite people to make the correct questions to actually make a change on their behaviors. So we always invited them to come back with a reflection on each of the content sections and how they would implement in their own areas. So let me explain a bit, if we could move to the next one. How's the program per se? We decided to approach this new challenge through a different scope. So the first thing that we decided was to launch through a set of new partnerships. We were already working with Deloitte. They are our thought partners in our leadership development programs. And they were helping us building the program architecture and bringing the expertise of experienced leaders that could share the thought and mindset that we want in the company. So we were already working with Deloitte, and we decided to include Harvard to bring also the best in class content and materials for managers, and where we already had like proven concepts where things were already working in another companies, and the thought of those leaders is aligned to what we're trying to manage. So we decided to work as well with Harvard. Finally, we decided to start building the whole experience, which became a digital experience, through NovoEd. I'm going to go through that in the following slide with much more detail, because I really need to enhance what are the learning and design principles that guided the whole development of the program. So allow me to elaborate in a moment more on that, but we selected NovoEd because they brought the digital and social components to make sure that we could build the experience and deliver it successful through the organization. And finally, one of the evolutions that we made to the program is to make sure that we could make an add-on to make the learning to continue even after the program has finished. So we decided to add the partnership of the grid, which is the last component, and that was added almost 3 or 4 months after the program was developed first. And then when we decided to decide on the people that we were gonna be designing to, we decided to design to the persona of the new manager. But the content per se is useful for any manager at the company on any level. So we wanted to make sure that we share that. So even though that we want all new managers to come to the program, all the other managers should participate as well to make sure that we have a consistent thought and behaviors promoted through all the company. And the program at the end ended being a 3-month experience. So we launched at least 3 cohorts in a year. And that is actually gonna change in the short future because we are in the process of creating a new version. And I'm gonna speak about that in a moment. If we could move to the next one.
You know, actually, Claudia, we had a question that came in, I think that's relevant here when you talk about the participant population. Someone was asking, you know, given that you know, Cemex is a multinational company, is Connect offered in multiple languages, or are all the leaders, is there a requirement to speak English as a common language for this program?
That's a great question. You should know that English is our common language, so we expect managers of all levels to speak English. But on reality, we have a really a big path to work on that process. So we are right now in the middle of translating the program to Spanish. So we're gonna cover more or less 80 to 90% of our audience having English and Spanish versions. But we do have other small populations where we do have other languages, but you may understand that the translation is very complex, and having these kind of partners, well, we do have a lot of copyrights, etc., to protect and make sure that their content is delivered in the best way, right? In a protected best way.
Gotcha. Great. And then just one other question on, because you've got all these partnerships up there, that triggered for someone to look at, you know, how many different partnerships there were. Is there a way for you, and this might be difficult right here, right now, but they're curious, could you estimate what the annual cost per person is for this program, given that there's so much, you know, from a partnership standpoint and everything else going into it?
Yeah, well, we do have a cost that it's not including part of the design cost, where we included specifically the expenses about the design section, but in the delivery section, which includes all the licenses, we are more or less about $200 per employee.
Great, thank you for responding to that. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Okay, so I thought it was really relevant to share with you that whenever we design a leadership development program, we always leverage these 3 same design principles. So those are aligned in all of our leadership development programs. The first one is that we use leaders as teachers. So we call them leader to leader. And that is a model that is working on all of our leadership development programs, and they participate in different ways. So, and now is the moment that I can share how that was used in NovoEd. But for example, we do have leaders that actually are recorded, so we have their video within the platform. And first, you would see the picture of our leader, Beatriz Tuman. She's the head of planning and development at Cemex Worldwide, and she's the Connect host. So she's the one receiving and sharing each of the cohorts with a video, sharing what is expected from them in terms of mindset, in terms of behaviors, in terms of what Cemex actually needs to take them to the next level and the work that they need to do on that specific model. So she's the host that models the desired behaviors, and she's also a great leader, by the way. And we're leveraging other leaders that participate on in different cohorts, and they actually propose themselves to participate, and they are leaders that participated in other of our development offers, and they participate in conversations, in collaborations, and evaluating missions of the participants. So they are the ones that on real life are going to be connected with that specific cohort, considering that the size of our cohort more or less is between 100 participants per cohort. So we would have between 10 to 15 leaders participating and engaging the audience at different moments of the program. And that is also part of the design principles. Then the second section is to have a curated content that is not only within the company. So we have content that is developed within the company, and of course we bring our experts of the different topics to participate and to share their great skills and knowledge. But also we would reach, and this is where Harvard made sense, to bring those thought leaders that would bring and make sure that the thinking goes one step above, right? And finally is how we make sure that every learning is going to be useful for the manager. So we make sure that the learning takes place in the context of real work. So they might learn through inspirational leaders, but at the end, they have a homework or a mission where they have to bring that to their own team, have a session, have a reflection, and then come back to the cohort and share it with the rest of the participants. So it's kind of their homework, but they actually have to plan and to bring whatever is the content of the different models to life. And I think that's a great way to really close the loop on the learning.
So another question has come in here that I think is important for that leaders as teachers model. Someone was asking, is it difficult to maintain that part of the program, the leaders as teachers? Because you would imagine most leaders have a pretty busy day as it is. So has it been difficult to keep that model going, or what's the experience been with that?
It's a great experience. You should know that leadership development at Cemex is not really new. So this is not the first program. So we already have more than 10 years easily developing leaders, and we call them our alumni. And whenever we need something, we reach to them, and they are very grateful, and they are very open to deliver the value back to the organization. So they participate as leaders, as mentors, as coaches, as in videos. They also send messages, they connect to their audience. They make sure that the leaders that are participating of the region are really a cohort that makes sense, that share the behaviors, they reach to them. So no, we don't have any problem because we have created like a bonus of I don't know, maybe it's a payback process that they really value, because they are also broadcasted in the company as part of the leaders that are already shaped or touched by the leadership development programs. They really feel like a culture. Just to share another example, if we think of another of our great programs, Ignite, and I love that program. It's a very impactful program that is delivered in a mix of digital and face-to-face. We ask them to participate or to really review materials or to give them their feedback, and we touch them in a monthly basis. So they know that they will hear from us because they are our alumni and they are willing to grow leadership at Cemex. So they do share that commitment.
That's great.
So if we could move to the next one. Sorry, just because before moving, sorry, David, one last thing. When we decided to leverage NovoEd, we actually evaluated other ways to deliver these design principles, but we found that NovoEd was the one that was helping us to reach both on the collaboration side, on the learning side, and also on the technical facilities to make sure that every functionality would work and would enhance the design principles to make sure that they are delivered correctly. And that's why we decided to leverage NovoEd to build Connect. Perfect. So that's Another of I think key learnings at Cemex is that whenever you're designing a development program, we design the framework that will guide the thought process of the whole development initiative. So after we had already agreed on the learning objectives, on the audience, and how we would approach the thinking and the mindset and the capabilities that we would develop, we designed this framework to guide the development of the program. So we started with the first topic, which is connect to my purpose, where when we are trying to make the manager to reflect and to get insights on how he's gonna forge his unique leadership style now on, and how that should have components that are shared through the company. In the second step would be how we connect with our team, making sure that we leave out the boss and supervisor model to a model where we are trying to think on a orchestra leading director, where you actually make the best of every person and recognize the differences on the value that they bring to the company. On the third one is how we're trying to connect at Cemex and making sure that we develop a business owner mentality, not only on silos, on being expert on your own area, but you understand the business as your own business, and you can even understand metrics, of course, and our basic indicators, but that you also think on the company as your company, and that you can find business opportunities when they arise. Because if you don't have that mindset, you cannot then switch that mindset to really find those new business opportunities. And also make sure that there's collaboration within the different areas of the company. And finally is how we connect outside of the organization, making sure that we create a new ecosystem thinking where we break boundaries and we start collaborating with stakeholder partners, etc., to make sure that we deliver value to our customers. So I think it actually makes sense when you go again and revisit Cemex values. We have customer centricity. Internal, we are focused on our people, so we are using the design center methodology. So we really try to make sure everything is aligned, that we get to know our people and to build the best experience that we want them to promote as managers. If we could go to the next one.
Yeah. Yes, and there were a couple of questions around sort of that whole process too, if you don't mind me coming back. So, you talk a lot about the mindset, and I know you're going to talk about it a little more even, but Tom was wondering, how do you drive that mindset into the organization? What specific areas do you work on to create the mindset?
Well, I think that within each of the development programs, we always are very clear on what are the reflections that we want our participants to take after each experience. So, for example, it's not only, I don't know, participating in a couple of videos and saying, hey, those are great principles, but how would you think that will have an implication for Cemex? How would change your role? So you please make sure that you reflect on these or 2 or 3 questions to make sure that you start guiding their thought process. So at the end, you then have a reflection with the whole cohort, sharing how the mindset or what are the mindset and behaviors that we are aiming to change and to see in the company at the different levels. And you can make examples and ask for reflection at different phases, but I think that it's a mix between asking the right questions, making them to ask the questions, because that's actually part of the learning, and then making sure that they apply that to their job. So it's not only as a thought process, but it's something that is pertinent to their day-to-day job.
Great, got it. And just one more before I let you move on. There's just, and it's, I'm sure it's one that's on a lot of people's minds. If you had one that you could pick, what was the most common or maybe biggest hurdle that you faced when putting this program together?
Nice one. I think that it was quite a challenge to create the content that would make a streamlight and a story, because at the end we didn't want just a set of videos all together, or video paper, and then comment homework and that's it. But we actually want to drive the think process, so we build a story. And I think that was the most challenging part, but the most rewarding. At the end, people recognize that this program is not similar to others because of that, because they think the power of that story through the whole program, within each of the models, but that in the whole program as well. And I think that's part of the magic. I don't hear you, David.
Yeah, we've had a few questions come in about impact, which I think is what we're going to get into here in this next section, about the impact the program has had on the organization.
Yes, maybe we can move and then come back to those. And if you can see, we really think that part of that goal of changing mindset, it really help us changing the culture while we develop those capabilities. So I think it's like we're in the example of how a plant is growing between rocks, that when you shape the correct mindset and then you share the behaviors, then everything makes sense, because there's a consistency in the way you think, in the way that you promote, in the way that you work, and then in the way that we behave even with our customers. So that consistency is what actually makes sure that the purpose is really driven through the whole organization and outside of the organization, creating a culture. If we could move to the next one. And now on, moving to the impact, as you were asking, we have different levels, of course, of seeing the impact of a development program. At the end of each of our online or digital experiences, we always ask for the Net Promoter Score. So that's, I think, in another slide, but we will reach that in a moment. And that's the last questions, actually. So one thing that we always do is we are always asking what's the Net Promoter Score for this program. And we are very happy to share that in Connect, it has always been very, very positive, around between 60 to 70 score overall. When we, as you know, we remove the detractors from the promoters of the course. And of course, we ask about how this has an impact on them as managers, on the satisfaction of the content and the program. And in the overall, they are always very high scores. But then, if we could move to the next slide. This year, we made an experiment. We have an annual survey that helps us track the workforce experience that we're trying to create for employees. That is something that evolved in the company. In the past, it was called the engagement survey. Now it's called the workforce experience survey. And we measure different things, and it's a survey that is maybe 40 questions long. And this year we decided to track our alumni, the Connect alumni, and compare it with the rest of the organization to see if there's an impact not only on their work, but on their whole employee experience. Because at the end, when you're trying to build culture, what you're trying is to have an impact on the whole employee's experience. So we started by comparing their EMPS, if they would recommend Cemex as a good place to work. And the overall score is 32, and this team score was 36, so it was 4 points above. That happened as well when we compared only engagement. So this team, the alumni that participated in Connect, had 3 points above. related to engagement. And just to review two of the other items in terms of satisfaction of the training received and how their own supervisors value their contribution to the business, it was above the overall score as well. So this year experiment. I think that we will need to find new ways to continue measuring impact. But we really think that we need to measure the impact at other levels, not just how happy they are at the program. Because if we go to our following slide, we could see a lot of great quotes. And I can remember one of UK saying, hey, this was quite a difficult year for us in the company, and having the program was really great to change not only how I perceive the efforts that the company are doing, but actually to modify what I want to do as a manager for the company. So we can really read tons of quotes, and we receive them on a very continuous basis after each of the programs, to actually think that what we are doing is doing something else than just having a training program. We are developing leaders at the company. We are developing the culture and the leadership we want aligned to the purpose of Cemex. And I think with that, we can move to questions.
Sure. And there's a question here that I have a question that I'm going to combine with an audience question that came in. The question was, was the program fully supported by the top leadership? That came in from the group. So did top leadership support this program? And then if so, how did you get the senior leadership to participate in the program?
That's a very good question. Let me start by sharing that we involved our different stakeholders at different levels of the design, but we started sharing what's the need before the program was already developed, even when we were going to start. So we created the business case for the need of the program before the developing of the program. At that stage, we had the buy-in of the company when we saw the numbers, specifically on engagement and on different things that could help us to actually make the case of why was this very important, and also identifying what were the behaviors that we wanted to develop. So that came actually very easily at the beginning of the program, and I think that they were disappointed when we came with the first effort and no great results, but they were still saying that there was a clear need, and we had to find a way to solve it. So that's why we made the second and very successful effort. But as I was sharing previously on the presentation, it was not a straight line to success, right? We really had a lot of learnings through the program.
Right. So one of the things that might not have been clear to folks is that this is a completely online program, right? This is not in person?
Yes, exactly. It's fully leveraged on NovoEd, so it's fully digital. We have a webinar to start and a webinar to close, but participants are asking for another personal touch points, and that's going to be part of the evolution on the future. But at this point, we only have those two real life contacts. And well, leaders have another one because we train them before each of the cohorts. So that's a third one.
Yeah. And given that that's the nature of the program, have you had to make any adjustments over the last few months given the remote work and what's been going on?
Well, not exactly, because when you see the architecture of the program, it's built on very generic, not generic, but very specific things to develop that you can show wherever you are. So it really didn't modify but part of the program was already exploring the new ways of working. So we might need to develop that more in the future, but at this stage, I think it covers quite a bit the new reality of managers in the company.
Gotcha. And how long has this program been in existence? Someone was asking.
Yeah, I think it's almost a year and a half.
Okay, so
We
yeah, pretty
develop
new.
it. Yeah, it's pretty new. It's a year and a half already implemented, but we spent 3 or 4 months before that
Right.
developing the program and running a pilot.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. Going back to sort of the scores and the feedback and the results that you were getting, someone was asking on those scores, do they look at the department of people who are an alumni or alumnus of the program versus those departments that of folks that did not attend the program?
Yes, yes. That's the comparison against the others, against the rest of the audience of the same level.
Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, so you got to see some actual differences there in the scores.
Yes, we do.
What about, so given that nature that it's, the way it's set up online, someone was asking, is there any sort of experiential component? So, is there anything that these leaders are able to do from a, try by, learn by doing, trial and error, observation, anything like that?
Well, yes, as I was sharing part of the learning in the context of real work is how they bring the concepts to life, and they have like a mission per each of the models. So they might have to go and to actually do real things with their teams and then come back and report back to the rest of the cohort and use that information to inform their homework. And that is part of of those missions, and they actually have to assign time to work with their teams and have evidence of that. They share the team's photo and the work that they are doing, and then the documents that they are uploading. So you could see the journey that they are going through to arrive to those results. Because maybe sometimes the results are not that great, but you can see the journey and then push for a better understanding of the journey, etc.
Gotcha. About how long does it take someone to get, is there a set pathway for how long it takes someone to get through the whole program?
Yes, it's almost 11 to 12 weeks. We
Okay.
have models that are shorter and others that are longer. The ones that are longer are 3 weeks long. So we have 2 models of 3 weeks long. And then it always happens that you have vacation somewhere in the world within those 3 months, because we cannot align the whole calendar. So we might have at the end to give a couple of days just to make sure that people can catch up if they had holidays between the program, right?
Mm. So there's some sort of big picture questions that came in that I wanted to present you with. So one of those is this idea that, how do you overcome the fear that some employees feel in being honest and authentic, right? So that in order to do something like what these programs where you're really trying to shift a mindset and get purpose driven, how do you overcome that fear that people have maybe of being honest and open to get real information because they're afraid, maybe of retaliation or what have you? Is that something that's built into the program, or is that something you've even encountered?
Well, we don't encounter that. Part of the process is that we have the program is for models long, but we have an additional welcoming model where we set the stage and we create a welcoming environment where they can know that they are safe to share, and that we get to know them personally. They do share about their families, their hobbies. So we get to connect people that, for example, love to bike, and others that love to fish and whatever. So we start creating connections even with people that they don't imagine, because they are, I don't know, in another totally different geography, for example, in Philippines or in Egypt, and someone in southern Mexico, in Merida, for example. So you start creating those connections, and that is part of the leaders' cohort work. to make sure that you start sharing, hey, did you saw that there's someone else with those hobbies, or did you saw that that person also shares that? And so you start creating an environment where when they feel comfortable building on each other comment, and you don't just remove or dequalify or say something bad around something, one of the comments, but we actually try to build that trust. And within the welcoming of the program, we are very clear saying that this program will have no consequence on anyone's
Gotcha.
performance, but this is a safe environment where everyone's here to learn. And I think that's actually set on the welcoming model to make sure that we set the correct
There
yeah.
was there were also a couple of questions. I'm going to try to combine them here to see if we can get two with one. But the idea around people being resistant to change. So if you're trying to do something like change mindsets and get people bought into this purpose, how did you handle leaders that may have been resistant to that? And the way I'm combining with another question, someone was saying that often in a competitive industry such as yours, leaders, when they deal with the business, tend to be a little bit more, have more of a thick skin and are focused on short term and profits. How do you get them to change? So it's the idea of like, what's the change management process like to get people who might be resistant to this type of thinking?
That's a great question. I think that we try to address that on different ways during the program. One of those would be starting with the audience composition. So when you start creating your cohorts, you want to have the correct mix of new managers, which are going to be open to new ideas and willing to do what they have to do to be successful on their new role, and maybe a small number of those that are lagging and that that they might be difficult, because when they are sharing the energy, the comments of the rest of the cohort, and they see their senior leaders sharing the examples of real life on how they lived that specific situation, they start thinking that's not only something that you say, but that's a way to behave and to work. And I think that it takes more time with some people than other, but at the end, I would say that the ratio is very big. Seeing the real example of your managers, of the great leaders at Cemex, and then being inspired for women that are very brave, breaking the way that things have been done in the past. So we have great examples. Just to give you an example of the multiculturality and the differences of the different leaders, we have one video that's recorded in Arab. And of course, it has subtitles, because even though I wouldn't understand anything, but that impacts a lot and sets the stage that even though that some people may speak Croatian, they make their best of speaking English and try to communicate with the rest. And we know that it's not the first language of most of them. So we try to make sure that we encourage that conversations, and that is part of that modification on the culture and sharing those behaviors, right?
Right, and so we're up at the hour, and but I'm going to give one more question because there's a lot of great questions that came in. I think we hit most of them on either the slides or in our conversation here. This one has to do a little bit more, and I'm going to again combine two questions that were focused around sort of psychology. The idea of, did you do any sort of pre-assessment to the program as far as people who were going to be in it, like an EQ or Myers-Briggs, just to see where people were at a baseline? And then was there sort of any organizational psychology involved in designing the program at any stage?
Well, no, we don't make a psychological assessment of participants prior to participate. And I would say that part of that is guided through the thinking and the participation of Deloitte, while the design of the program, because they brought tons of experts to develop the program. So I think that was addressed that way. David,
so
it has been a pleasure.
yes, thank you so much. And we've made a chance for most of the questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your questions. They are captured in the feed, and we'll take a look at those and see if we can't reach out to you after the fact. But thank you so much. And Lori, would you like to close us out?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, David, for hosting today and for all of your great research and for your insightful questions. Claudia, it has been a pleasure working with you leading up to this point, having you as a partner, and I'm always learning something new when I hear from you and feel quite inspired. I also wanted to make sure I thanked our audience here today. Thank you for registering for this this webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your day. We all recognize that you're running from Zoom to Zoom or team meeting to team meeting, and we appreciate you spending an hour of your day with us. I also wanted to just remind you of the survey that you'll see as you're leaving. We really value your feedback and would love input on future topics. And finally, I wanted to bring to your attention a course that we have coming up actually on the NovoEd platform about the topic of learning experience design. So whether you might be interested in this, or you have some colleagues or teammates that might be interested in this 5-week online course, you can go ahead right now and use your phone's camera to scan the QR code to sign up for the course, or you can check out novoed.com at some other time. So again, thank you. Have a wonderful day. It's been great being together with all of you.
Great, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori, David.